Many of you have asked for a Palladio 101 video that covers the basics of Palladio, the interface, and kind of how everything is set up. And that's what this video is all about. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to walk you through the setting up of a template and a widget in Palladio. We're going to go through the editor. I'm going to show you how it all works, what all the buttons do, and how to go about adding stuff and modifying a template or a widget. And I'm also going to quickly talk about things like exporting widgets and templates to your email platform. And all of this, just to be perfectly clear up front, there are going to be more in-depth videos that go into depth on things like exporting and liquid and slots and so on and so forth. But I wanted to create just a video that walks through big picture Palladio, how it all works. So what you see on your screen right now is a brand new Palladio workspace. Nothing's in it. All I've done is I've added my ConvertKit API keys so that I can show you how the integrations work. So what a workspace is in Palladio is, think of it as a set of templates, widgets, and brand settings. So with Palladio, you can have your account can be set up so that you can have as many workspaces as you want within it. So this is useful if you have, let's say, multiple different brands that you're working with, or you're a consultant or an agency or whatever, and you're doing email marketing for your clients, and each of them has their own colors, their own template needs, and so on. So definitely you're going to want to make sure you're on an account that will allow you to have multiple workspaces if that's needed for you. But if it's one email list, one brand, one whatever, then you're probably just going to deal with one single workspace. But when you set up a new account for the first time, you're going to see what's on my screen right now. So the first step is to create an email template. And what we can do with that is we can either start with a basic template, which is just a very simple logo and then the email content in the footer, or you can choose to import one of the gallery templates that I've added in. So I'm going to be adding a lot more to this. So depending on when you're watching this video, there's probably going to be quite a few more options than you see on your screen in a minute. But this is really just to help you kind of get started. And you can say, I want to look like Morning Brew, or I want to look like Indie Hackers or whatever else, with some tweaks with your logo, with some color differences and so on. So if you want to kind of take the shortcut and emulate a popular look and feel of a newsletter, you can do that, or you can just start with the basic template. So I'm going to actually start with the basic template, which when you choose one of these templates, we're going to walk you through what's going to happen in your workspace. So in this case, the basic template doesn't include any widgets. There's nothing associated with it, so it's not going to show anything. It is going to add two colors to your account, which is going to be the link color and the content color, so this kind of blue and black color. And it's going to change some font stuff. So in this case, we're not changing any fonts. We're just going to use the default sans serif font for the primary font and the default serif font for the secondary font. So that all looks fine. And then I'm just going to call this Brennan's test template. So what you call it and the description you put is completely for your own purposes only. This is never actually included in the template that gets shown to your readers or anything like that. It's really just for your own organizational needs. So once you click Create New Template, we're going to import this gallery template into your brand new workspace. And now you're in the editor. So the editor is where you're going to be spending pretty much most of your time in Palladio. So this is where you go and you set up email templates, or you set up widgets, and you move stuff around, and you can configure what they look like and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do now, since you're going to be spending most of your time in the editor, is walk you through what the editor does and how it's set up. So there's four areas, if you will, of the editor. You have the header area up here. You have the left sidebar. You have the content area. And then you have the right sidebar. So the header area, the way that's divided up is you have your breadcrumb navigation. So in this case, we are working with the template, and this template is called Brennan's test template. If I click the gear, I can change the name, I can change the description, I can delete it, I can copy it, or I can move it to a different workspace. So this is useful if you want to copy something from one client to another you can do that too here. To the right side of the header, we have the kind of the usage, if you will, operations. So here's where, when we're ready to actually put this into, in this case, ConvertKit, where it looks the way we want it to, and we're ready to actually start using it, we'll click Add to ConvertKit, and it's going to walk you through how to actually get this into ConvertKit. So I'm not going to go into the details of how this all works in this video, but basically this is going to be a bit of a wizard that says click this button, go into ConvertKit, do this, this, and this, and then click this button to say you've done it. So once it's in ConvertKit, then the next thing you're going to probably want to do is use it. So if you're doing a simple template like what you see here, where all you have is just your email content area, so this is kind of the usual email template where you have wrapping material and then you have the email itself, you usually won't actually ever need to use an email for this template in that case. But as I'm about to show you, use an email becomes really, really powerful once you start getting into slots. So I'm going to jump ahead into the content area for a second. And there are other videos that I'm producing that go into a lot more depth on this, but I want to just give you a quick idea of why Palladio is so cool. So let's say you wanted to make this a sponsored newsletter, and your newsletter may or may not be sponsored. So some weeks somebody sponsors it, other weeks no one does. So let's say we want to put under the logo a little, this week, this newsletter is brought to you by XYZ. So what we're going to do, I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to get into more depth on how I do all this stuff later, but just bear with me. I'm going to do a show if. So what we're going to say here is if, in this case, we're going to do a check that says if we have a sponsor, we're going to show something like sponsored by XYZ. Now to set it up the way we want it to, because usually if you think about it, an email template is pretty hard-coded. It's pretty static. Like the email content itself, the middle bit, that changes. But the stuff around it, the stuff in the header, the stuff in the footer, it's pretty static. But in this case, we want to put something in the header just to really show it's in the header. Let's actually put this above the logo. So above the logo, we're going to have sponsored by XYZ if there's a sponsor. So what you can do with Palladio is you can set up what's called a slot. And a slot, think of it as a variable or a metadata that we're attaching to this newsletter template. So I'm going to click on slots, I'm going to click add slot, and I'm going to call this sponsor name. And we'll put the default sponsor name as Acme Inc. So what we can do now is we can say, I can go back to this check right here and say when sponsor name is set. So if we have a sponsor, we're going to put sponsored by sponsor name. And now you're going to see it's being replaced by that default that I've put in. So what's cool about this, to get back to my use an email, now that we're still in the header, when you click use an email, it's going to say, hey, who's the sponsor name? You can leave it blank, or you can put something in like, Google or something like that. It's going to show you what it will look like. So in this case, sponsored by Google is the, it's going to be shown above the logo. And then it's going to give you the code that whenever you're ready to use this email template in an email, you just click this blue button, paste it, in this case, into ConvertKit in the email editor, whether it be a sequence email or a broadcast email. And then it's going to spit out, sponsored by Google or sponsored by Acme Inc. or nothing if you left sponsor name blank. So what's cool about Palladio is you can do more than just have email templates that have email content. You can have email templates that have email content, but also meta information like, is there an article URL associated with this email? If so, maybe we want to make it so to the right of the logo, there's a link that says, click here to view this on our website. Cool, you can do that. Likewise, if you want to have a featured product that is related to this newsletter, and you want to have a big, bold widget under your email content that's flashy and has a shadow and all that good stuff that promotes that product, you can say, hey, this is this week's broadcast I'm working on with the newsletter template. I'm going to put the article URL. We're going to set that as, and then you paste in the URL from your blog. And then you put the featured product is ABC. And then the big ABC flashy thing can show at the bottom. And then you just put your usual content in ConvertKit, in this case, right here. So you just swap out your content goes here with the usual way you write emails. So that's how that works. But if you don't set up any slots or anything like that, you don't actually need to ever use an email. You can ignore the gallery bit. That's because I am an administrator of Palladio, so that's something for me. This clock thing, what this will do is this will show you a revision history. So I'm auto-saving, and this will show you all the changes I've made, and you can see what it looked like. So here it is without the sponsored by. Here's before I made that change. So if I wanted to, I could go and restore any previous version that I had. So this is useful if you screw something up and you want to go back to something, from a few minutes ago or an hour ago. You can do that. And then finally, we have the ability to autosave. So if it's unchecked, you would need to click save every time anything you do you want to save, or you can just have autosave on, and then anytime you do anything in Palladio, it will just save for you. So that's the header. Now I want to show you the left sidebar. So the left sidebar has three main areas to it. So you have the structure of the email template or the widget. So what this does is this is the hierarchy, if you will, of what's in this template. So we have a wrapping container. That's the responsive container that we've set up. That's part of this template. We have the logo. We have the other area that's kind of offset. We have the email content itself. And then we have our footer area where we just have some text. So what's nice about this on the left is you can also move stuff around by dragging and dropping on the left side. So if I want to put the logo for whatever reason in the footer, I just drag that down, or I can do that from the content area itself. So it's up to you to determine. You can either drag stuff around in the left sidebar, or you can visually move around in the content area. So that's on the left side or the first tab, if you will, of the left sidebar. The next tab is how you add elements to a template or a widget. So you have three different core types of elements. You have structural elements, which are like containers or two-columned layouts or whatever else. You have elements like textual paragraph content, custom HTML, images, dividers, buttons. And then you have, and you also would have email content, which you can only have that once at a time. So that goes away if you've already added it to your email. And then you have logic elements. And this is really useful. I kind of already showed you this before, but this, you can say something like, let's say if somebody is tagged with, or let's say that their first name equals Brennan, we can show a fancy message to somebody whose first name is Brennan. So I would see this message. So usually to do this in a platform like ConvertKit, you need to do a lot of liquid coding. Palladio writes the liquid for you. So it is still going to create liquid for you, but you don't need to think about it or worry about it. And then finally, the last bit is the preview as a subscriber. So let's show that. Let's put here, hey, Brennan. So if we were to preview this as, trying to think of somebody who's on my list. Well, I'll put myself. So this is Brennan's email, so we can put it in the description here. So if I preview it as Brennan in my ConvertKit account, it shows, hey, Brennan here. I'm trying to think of, sparkloop.app. Louis. So this is optional, but this lets me put like a describer here. So Louis doesn't see hey Brennan, but when previewing it as Brennan, he sees hey Brennan. This is really useful because you can say you can add a test subscriber who's a customer, somebody who is in a certain segment, somebody who is not a customer, and you can kind of save them here. So then you can just kind of like rapid fire toggle through and say, hey, what would this template look like for a customer, for a non-customer? And it's really simple for you to look at that. So that's the left sidebar. And now we're going to make our way to the content area, which is kind of the showcase of the editor. Here we have a few different things. So we have the actual visual layout of the email itself. You can see when I hover over, we get these little borders put around all the different elements. So this just gives you an idea of where the geography that everything takes up. Anything we're hovering over gets a light blue outline. And then at the top, so all of this is also you can drag and drop and move stuff around. And when you're adding something, you're going to be dragging it out to this visual area, and you can, again, move it wherever you want. Up here at the left, or the top bar, I should say, of the content area, you have the ability to preview it. So what preview does is the mode you see here has a lot of annotation added. So, we have this logic thing that says when subscriber's first name is Brennan. Obviously, this isn't going to show in an email, but it's useful to see here in the editor. So what preview does is this is what actually is the HTML that's going to be created that will be sent in the emails you send from your email platform. This is useful because sometimes there are slight differences, like you wouldn't know, is the padding between lorem ipsum up here and the hey Brennan, is that correct? Is that fine? But if you go in preview mode, you can see exactly what that padding looks like here in a way that's a little harder to figure out when you're in the normal editing mode. You can also click test, which will let you send an email to your any email address, but ideally your email. And this is useful because let's say that you have a Gmail account and you want to preview it in the Gmail app, because sometimes Google Mail, for instance, it does things a bit differently than other email clients. So it's a good idea to kind of send yourself an email and open it up in your email client of choice and see what it looks like. Make sure it looks fine. Showing slots, what that does is if you set up slots, which I kind of briefly touched on before, you'll remember that it kind of put the default value in for you. So if you toggle this on, it'll just kind of show you a little blue box above any slot to kind of give you an idea of what content in an email is dynamic. On the right side, we have this liquid front matter. So what this is, to be honest, you probably don't need to worry about this at all, but this is useful because this allows you to set up liquid code that will run before that'll run before the actual email template or the widget is shown. So why that is useful would be in the referral widget that I've created. There's a lot of mathematical things that happen. So we crunch things like how many people has this person referred, what tier does that put them in, how many more people do they need to refer to get to the next tier, and all that's a lot of math. So what ends up happening is in this liquid area, there's a lot of liquid stuff that's happening that's crunching numbers and computing things, so that when the template itself gets shown, all the data we need about like how many do they have to go and all that kind of stuff is easily accessible. So if you're not into liquid, if you don't want to worry about that, you probably will never need to touch this area. I already showed you the slots area, so this is useful for things like you can set up dynamic content of like plain text, URLs, images, whatever. And you can just toggle on slots to define the slots for the widget or the email template. So I gave you an idea of how it could be used for the email template, like with an article URL or a sponsor or whatever else. Widgets, it's really useful because widgets, if you think about like a testimonial, you typically have the quote, you have the person's name, and you have their photo or their image. So there would be 3 slots for a testimonial. You'd have those 3 different things as the dynamic content of that testimonial. So whenever you show a testimonial, whenever you want to use the testimonial widget in an email you're sending, you're going to go into the testimonial, click use an email, type in the quote, type in the person's name, enter in their image, and then click copy to clipboard and use it in your email. And that'll make it so with one testimonial widget, you can have, you can create 50 different testimonials that are all different, that look really nice and designed and everything else. So slots are super, super necessary with things like widgets where dynamic content is kind of the name of the game. And then finally, all the way to the top right in the content area, we have the ability to toggle between desktop and mobile displays. So what you see here is what it would look like on a desktop. If I click the mobile icon, you can then get an idea of what this would look like on a phone. So super useful if you're setting up a responsive template where you're saying, well, I'll get into that stuff in a bit, but basically you can make certain elements responsive. In the right sidebar, we have any contextual properties for the element that you're working with. So if I were to click on the logo here, you'll see now that we have the ability to change the logo, to set up a link, put an alternate text to change the size. So let's say we want to make it 250 pixels, change the margin, change the padding, really do whatever. So this is something you just can't usually do on a platform like ConvertKit, where you have this granular level of detail where you can say, I want 3 pixels of padding at the top of this paragraph. I want 10 pixels of margin at the bottom. I want to put a shadow on it. I want to put an outline on it. You have full control, just like you would in a platform like Webflow or something. So I'm going to encourage you to just go through, and as you're working on your templates, click through the elements you've added, and you'll see how the properties on the right change depending on what you have clicked on. If you choose the home element or you unclick what you're working on, it's going to go to what are called the core styles of the template or the widget. Actually, just the template, because the widget doesn't actually have core styles, and I'll get to that in a second. So this is where you can say, what's the background color of this email template? What's the default font size? What's the default text color? You can set all of that up. Link, what should links look like? Paragraphs, dividers, full control over literally everything. You can also modify things like your headings. So what should your main headline? How big should the typography be? Should it be bolded or not? What font do we use? Line height, text color. So you can really go wild in defining the defaults for the kind of the core properties, the things like headings and lists and stuff like that. You can also, if you're comfortable with CSS, you can add custom CSS here. So if you want to say something that you just can't do or easily do with Palladio's properties, you want to add custom CSS, you can do that too. So that's what happens when you're when you engage with anything, whether it be the home element, which is deselecting everything, or just choosing something. You'll see that the right sidebar changes accordingly. So that's pretty much the editor. And again, this is pretty much consistent. This is going to stay the same between whether you're working with an email template or you're working with a widget. So let's look at widgets for a second and kind of look at the differences. So I'm going to click the home button. You go to the widgets area, and I'm going to choose the widget that I want to work on. So let's say that we're going to do something simple, which is going to be we'll just do the callout widget. And this is going to add a few different colors. Actually, let's do this callout widget. It's going to add a few different colors like this outline and so on. So we're going to call this, let's just leave the default name, callout with heading. And there we go. So now we're in the widget editor, which looks a lot like the normal editor. But you'll notice on the right sidebar that we don't have the core styles. Instead, we have the ability to show it in a certain template, because widgets are always used in a template. So if that template has different fonts or different font sizes or whatever else, the template itself is going to look different. So you can choose the template that you want to preview it in. And this is useful because you might have like a email template for your sales emails and one for your newsletter. And you might use the same testimonial widget in each of those, but there might be different font configurations or whatever else in each of those templates. So it's useful to see, like, how does this look different? And you can absolutely set, like, you could say, even though the default font size is, say, 18 pixels, I want this widget to be 20 pixels. So that way it's consistent across both. But that is something you'll just need to manually do. You go into a paragraph and you configure the font size to be a certain size. All right, so in the widget itself, in this case, we have 2 different slots I've set up, the callout and the heading. So you can see the heading is this hello, the callout is this text here, and this is that variable content I was getting at before. So when we use it in an email, we can choose the callout, we can choose the heading, and we have all that we can use, and this is what it would look like here. So yeah. And then when you go to add this to ConvertKit, it's going to walk you through how ConvertKit generates a snippet ID. So whatever gets set by ConvertKit, you're going to want to make sure it is in here. So that way, whenever Palladio uses this widget, we have the right snippet ID that ConvertKit created for you. So really, outside of this, there's no real differences between the editor for the email template editor and the widget editor. Now, where there is a difference is now that we have this widget. Okay, so let's go back into the template. And I want to show you now how you can use the widget that we've just created in this template. So let's say above the logo, we want to put this widget. I just drag it out here, and you'll see here that we can configure the variables that are used, that are passed into this widget. So let's say we want to put a, it's Thanksgiving or something. So happy Thanksgiving. Hope you and your family have a good one. So here's an example of how we have a widget that's going to be kind of static and used all the time. But what we're doing now is in this email template, for the purpose of Thanksgiving, we're going to hard code this in, and we're basically going to put in a Thanksgiving message. So what's going to happen is when I add this email template now to ConvertKit, it's going to say, cool, here's a template, here's a logo, here's all the content area stuff. But we're also going to embed this widget that we've created that's in our account, in our ConvertKit account, and we're going to pass along this Thanksgiving message into it. So widgets are not only really useful from a kind of a one-off purpose, where you can say, I'm writing a newsletter and I need to throw in a testimonial, I need to throw in this kind of call out thing, make it really nice and dynamic, or you can hard code them. So a really good example of hard coding it in an email template would be, you want to put a signature widget. So let's say you have a signature widget that's shared across all of your email newsletter templates or all your email templates. And so you have a single widget that anytime you update that, all your templates get updated effectively. But you want to say maybe in the newsletter template, you include that signature widget, but you put in a slot that says something like hide the bio. But in the sales email template, you want to show the bio. So you can do that too, or you can just add the template or the widget as is and hard code it in the template. And again, the use there would be if you have like a product promo area, or a recent podcast that you want to show, or something like that. Your latest episode of the podcast, or your signature. These are things that you kind of want to share maybe across all your different email templates. And you want to make it so when you update it once, it just kind of percolates out and everything using it gets updated at once. So that's really, that kind of stuff is really where Palladio's power shines, is the ability to do things like that really, really simply. So the last thing I want to show you, or the last two things I want to show you, is the brand area. So this is actually this is in the process of being completely overhauled, what this looks like. But here's where you can centrally manage colors. So let's say you're using this for your links and you want to change it to purple. You could just do that here. And then every template that uses the links color will have a new link color of a purple link. And then you can also change your fonts. So this is the standard kind of pecking order that we've set up of fonts. So what this means is that the topmost font is one we try to use first. If we can't find it on the person's computer, it'll keep going down the list until it finds a font. So this just came straight out of a CSS framework called Tailwind, where this is a really safe list of sans serif fonts that should work and look nice on any computer. But some templates that you import, like the like James Clear's template or whatever else, they're going to use different Google fonts or whatever else. So these will get changed, and you can only really have one primary list of fonts and one secondary list of fonts per workspace. So it's really important to keep in mind, because again, widgets and templates will reference the same primary or secondary font. So if you want to go really wild, it might make sense to have multiple workspaces that you set up. Okay, last thing I want to show you is a relatively new addition, which is the link builder. And this is really powerful because it's a way that you can create links quickly. So let's say you want to link to, like, I don't know, your homepage, and you want to either add a tag and or set a custom field when they click that link. Let's say you want to set first name to John when they click a link. You just click copy to clipboard, and now if you put that link in an email in ConvertKit, it will automatically set the first name custom field to John anytime somebody clicks that link, or you can have it also add a tag if you want to. And I know ConvertKit can create links that set tags when that link is clicked, but it ends up creating an automation rule in the background. I don't know if you ever go to your automation rules list, you'll see like tons of them if you do this a lot. And that can be a bit unwieldy. And there's also no easy way to make it so within ConvertKit to create a link that will set a custom field. So if you're doing segmentation with custom fields, you're kind of going to be out of luck with that. So that's what's in Palladio as is. I'll continue to update this video as we have more features rolled out and everything else, but hopefully this gives you a good overview of kind of what you can do with the platform.